If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Today we have author, teacher, and activist Brightflame with us. Diane, how are things going?
I'm in recovery mode from November. Game of Tomes was very busy this year, but it is over now. It went really well. We all had a really great time.
Awesome.
I got a lot of writing work done as well for a change. Instead of just managing the event, I've now edited both Book 2 and Book 3 of the Toy Soldier Saga, so those will be coming out in 2025. I'm very excited about that. I had to stop doing my audiobook recording of the first book, A Few Good Elves, though, because I got sick at the beginning of the month, and my voice is just now recovering. So,
Yeah. Okay, I was wondering what was going on with those because, well, you know, I've been waiting.
Everybody's been waiting. People probably feel like George R.R. Martin fans by now. I'm sorry. I promise you I am trying to get my shit together. So, but yeah, 2025, probably in the spring. I'm hoping for March, cross my fingers, right? So.
I mean, you're not 10 years late or 15 or whatever Martin's up to at this point. So I think you got him. I think you're good.
Cool. That's cool. Thank you for forgiving me. And what's going on in your life right now? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you haven't. Let's see. I got my black belt since the last time I talked to you, I think.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. And really not much, we're recording this in December, so it's like holiday season, well, Christian holiday season.
Yule's coming up. Pagan too.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a Christian particularly, but we do celebrate those holidays nonetheless. And, just busy doing holiday stuff, basically. The only exciting thing I really have to say at this point is I started Final Fantasy IV. So in my great Final Fantasy replay.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. You just want to get to our guest? Dive into it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay.
I've been looking forward to this. The book's good. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. We will be right back with Brightflame. Okay, and we are back. Brightflame writes, teaches, and makes magic towards a just, regenerative world. Her debut novel, The Working, is available now, and her short climate fiction is featured in Solarpunk Creatures, Bioluminescent, and Solarpunk Magazine. Her globally acclaimed workshops for magical and mainstream audiences foster interconnection and resilience and help us explain our notion of what is possible. She co-founded the Center for Sustainable Futures at Columbia University that features her workshops and nonfiction. She's a member of the Climate Fiction Writers League, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, Brooklyn Speculative Fiction Writers, and Broad Universe. She lives on Lenape territory, Turtle Island/US, with a human, a forest, a labyrinth, bees, turtles, fungi, rocks, and many other non-humans. Doodles, musings, and more at brightflame.com. And that's BRIGHTFLAME.com. All right. Welcome, Brightflame.
Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking, and this is going to be fun.
Awesome. I hope so, too. I haven't sent it to you yet, so merry meet.
And merry meet to you.
So, one of the things when you originally emailed me asking to come on, one of the things that fascinated me about you is the whole the magic thing, right? And I could tell that you practice pagan spirituality, and your book was about witches, and I'm like, wow, this reminds me of Diane so much. It's unbelievable. Like, we probably need to bring this person on. And I immediately messaged Diane and was like, hey, check this out. And Diane's like, yes, we have to do this.
Yeah, I don't talk about it a lot on the show, but it's not like I haven't mentioned it. I come from a pagan background as well. I guess, like, I had a metaphysical store. I was licensed to do marriages. I did it for some 20 years, right? Lately, for a while, I haven't been doing this within the community, right? Sort of my own practice at home, but it is my spirituality, right? I know the community that Brightflame comes from reasonably. I speak the language that she's speaking in the book. We were both in bioluminescent, by the way. I don't know. I wrote the story about talking to the goddess of the aliens there.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't realize that. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Well, if you all start getting too cryptic in your language, I'm going to make you all define some vocabulary for me. So just a warning now.
Hey, no problem. Brightflame obviously has advocacy work as well as part of what she does, clearly, right? And I used to do the pagan pride organizing around here. I am used to explaining it, so no problem.
Yeah, I came back. I hadn't been to pagan pride in a number of years, but because my book is out, I went to two in my area, well, to Philadelphia, and another regional one. I hope to go back to the New York one next year as well. I haven't been to that in a number of years.
I have not been out to your neck of the woods. I'm on the other side of the continent. I'm from BC, Canada, right? So getting to New York is a hard prospect for me. I'd like to someday go do that. Yeah, but
I've been to New York. There's too many people. New York City. New York State is lovely.
I grew up in New York City, and I only inched my way away from there. I still have a pretty large presence in New York, even as I live in a forest at present.
I could tell from your book that you legitimately lived in New York City. You know, the way that you discuss like traveling to PA and back and forth and that sort of thing, and you have to catch the bus and the taxi, and it's not like a focus or anything, but just the way that you're like, oh yeah, this person had to do this and then this to get to this point. It's just like, oh yeah, they obviously have really done this.
It's neat that you observe that.
Yeah, oh yeah, I could totally tell. So like, I think we should probably just like start at the beginning. You know, have you always been a science fiction fantasy fan? Did something in particular bring you into science fiction and fantasy genre? And like, what authors and books have really influenced you?
Well, I've always preferred fiction over nonfiction. Ever since I was young, I always wanted to have written a novel, but I really didn't grow into an actual writing practice for quite a while. But I knew that it would be fiction, and not a nonfiction witchcraft book, for instance, even though I have a lot of students over the years saying to me, why don't you write a book with your flavor of the craft?
Yeah.
Which you'll find in the working. But anyway, going back to your question.
Mm-hmm.
So I was drawn to sci-fi and fantasy, along with general fiction, historical fiction, even literary fiction, a lot of diverse writers, BIPOC writers, through the years. But when I was quite young, I was taken with books, Second World Fantasy books, like Anne McCaffrey's Pern series, for instance, and other books that even Second World were very anti-authoritarian. And then I began seeking out books that were, even if I didn't have a name for it yet, that were feminist, women-centered. Strong woman characters who didn't need the men or were fighting against a patriarchal kind of system. So back in the day, I was very taken with Marion Zimmer Bradley's books. And I know these days there's stuff about her background and her legacy, and I don't know what's true. I'm not going to even comment on that. But also, her books have been very influential and certainly were to me as a young person. And not just Mists of Avalon, which is, most witches I know have read Mists of Avalon, and they're like, oh, of course, Mists of Avalon, that's so foundational, that turned me into a witch, whatever. But for me, it was actually the Darkover books, like Sandera House, that spoke of a network of women in guilds and communities that were an alternative to the patriarchal society on Darkover, the planet. And it was like, wow, these guilds, you could travel from one to another and be accepted like as family. You'd have community. There were always like-minded folks around doing interesting things, and you could travel from one to another. So being part of such a network really drew me. So those were early influences for me. But then, through the years, writers like Louise Erdrich, Linda Hogan, Gail Tsukiyama, Elizabeth Berg added to kind of the breadth of the reading. That I did. And also, by the way, I think I haven't reread them. So probably I haven't picked up a Darkover novel since, I'm going to date myself, I don't know, the 70s or something. But they're kind of Solarpunk in that guild setup and the networking and the interconnection.
Interesting. Going back to your comments on Marion Zimmer Bradley, it's difficult to know how to deal with an artist that has influenced you positively, but turns out to be a bad person, right? Like, I know, I mean, there's many artists that are that way. Like Led Zeppelin, for example, just off the top of my head, terrible people, unbelievable music, in my opinion.
Terrible people stole all kinds of people of color's music and claimed it as their own. They gave no credit, no royalties. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And many things beyond that, for sure. You know what I mean? Like, but amazing musicians.
You know how I generally handle it is this, okay? Right? I don't know. Everybody's got to make their own decisions on this. The world is still struggling with Harry Potter at the moment.
Oh God,
right?
Yeah, that's a thing.
So my attitude is, okay, you know what? Death of the author. A book to some extent is like, it can still influence you positively, even if the person is complicated. And I realize that that's controversial, but nobody's perfect, man. Nobody is perfect. We all have dark sides. Brightflame gets into that in her book. She talks about shadow selves, right? All of us have shadow selves, right? And we, not that they're all necessarily like, quote, evil or whatever, but your shadow self is the part of yourself that you don't really want to admit exists, for whatever reason. It scares you, right? So death of the author, but I won't support them financially either, right? Like, I won't buy their books,
right?
Because they're going to get royalties. If I think their book, if I need it for some reason, I will buy it at a secondhand store. And I suppose that's, that may not work for everybody, but that's what I do.
Yeah, that's a good way to chop and dice the situation. And also, I always like to say when I'm in a discussion that's going to get recorded or whatever, like, this is how I'm thinking at the moment, which likely will change tomorrow or the next day. We all evolve.
Yeah. A good point. Just because I had an opinion 10 years ago doesn't mean I still have that opinion. And that's the problem with media, right? Things get preserved and then they come out like 20 years later and people are going, you said something stupid when you were a teenager. And you're like, I was a teenager. Duh.
Diane, I want to go back to something that you brought up from my book about working with our shadow sides. These days, I'm part of the reclaiming tradition of witchcraft, and we're a dynamic, evolving tradition, a non-hierarchic tradition. And one of the ways that we evolve, we're quite the anti-racist, anti-transphobic, all the things that is antithetical to
Always have
solarpunk
been.
are antithetical to reclaiming. And that's why I call us a solarpunk tradition. I'm starting to teach that way as well. But the term shadow, some of my dear friends in reclaiming are starting to challenge the word because it can be a ding to BIPOC people, right? It can be a little bit racist to say
Oh, yeah,
shadow or
interesting.
the dark side, meaning the the not as well liked side. So we're trying to relanguage, to come up with different ways of talking about it. I did leave shadow in the book because that's
Right.
what would be more understandable to the general public and other witches at the moment. But I also was like, I don't know, should I change that? That's a hard one. And also, our shadow selves are not the part of us we don't like and don't want to be part of us. They're the hidden juicy parts of us that would be good to make friends with and to come into relationship with. That's how I teach about that kind of stuff.
Okay, I was given a TLDR, right?
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I know. I just wanted to point that out for listeners
yeah, fair
because,
enough.
it's an issue now, at least in our community. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I
Huh.
didn't even occur to me when I was last active with the pagan community, and so I don't know. But I mean, I get there's also that liminal element, right? Like the thing is, yeah, right. Okay, it's not the bad part; it's the part that scares you for whatever reason, right?
Hmm.
But part of your strength is in what scares you, right? So,
Right, right.
you know, I love the names. That is that a thing? Like that's not something I encountered before. Is that a thing in reclaiming now where you name your shadow self?
It's one of the things I've encountered. Not everybody does, because the other
Right?
thing with reclaiming is we all are our own authority, as we say, and we
Yeah.
all develop kind of our own ways of working within the umbrella of reclaiming. And while we have some core classes, you don't even have to take them to call yourselves a reclaiming witch. You just have to agree to our consensed upon principles of unity. I first encountered that probably at a witch camp, and probably Starhawk was teaching that path, if I remember.
Alan, one for your benefit, Witch Camp is a very large event that goes on that I think, I mean, reclaiming it's their thing and it's huge, right? Like it's really influential in the pagan community. So yeah.
Can I ask a newbie question here? You both are saying the reclaiming. What does that mean exactly?
It's the name of a tradition, like a denomination of a Christian church.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's what we mean by
Got it.
tradition. What's your denomination? Are you a Baptist or a Lutheran or are you a Catholic? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There's so many flavors of witchcraft, and Wiccan, which is a separate thing, and yeah, there's just so many different paths, and lots of people making their own way in some eclectic form.
Well, I think, and I think we've touched on this a little bit, but if maybe we could directly hit this topic, like how exactly does witchcraft fit into Solarpunk? Because you're not the only
Mm.
person I know who's into witchcraft who's also into Solarpunk as well. It seems like those things go together very well. Like, why and how?
Great question, Alan.
So,
That's awesome.
a bunch of different things. Let me see if I can grab some of the threads that are crossing my mind. So, witches work with magic as our technology, right? Which for me, the shorthand of what magic is sensing and shaping energy, right? So it's a technology. And solarpunk is all about technology aligned with nature. The other thing about witchcraft is, at least in mine and many traditions, is that, we connect with the earth as sacred and as part of the earth. we're interconnected with all the living beings on the earth. We have our ways of communicating across that network,
Mm-hmm.
and other ways of knowing that are not the I guess Western ways of knowing. So all those things jibe for me with Solarpunk, bringing out the non-Western ways of knowing and interacting with the natural world. Magic as just another one of the technologies that's aligned with that natural world, as we would want all technology to be for Solarpunk futures, right? So there's that. And witchcraft, at least my tradition, is very collaborative. We're a non-hierarchic tradition, a feminist tradition. We work by consensus. Our practice is, for instance, that when we're teaching reclaiming classes and workshops, we always have at least two of us teaching so that we're modeling that there isn't only one way. So, that collaborative working. And we're an activist tradition as well as are many witchcraft traditions. You'll find reclaiming folks out in the streets as well as in their coven home or wherever. And in the workplace where everybody works, we're all over the place.
I liked that element in your book that your characters all came from incredibly different walks of life, right? That is, and I recognized them all, right? Like I have met all of these witches in some form or another, right? And I liked that element, but the fact that they all come together at the core, right? In terms of their ethos, and they all also have their own issues that make following that ethos challenging, and they have to look within to confront those things and find the answers, right? I think that's very cool. Alan, on that note, just a side thing, I would also argue there's a couple of core things. Wicca, witchcraft, neo-paganism, they're very, as you can hear, there are many different ways to do it, right? There's no one way, right? But there's some core ethos stuff that we tend to hold to. One of our most common things, it's not true to everyone, but it's very influential in a lot of traditions, is something called the charge of the goddess, right? Now, I wrote an exegesis article on this at one point, right? Basically, my argument was it's called a charge because it's a directive, right? And the directive is treat the earth kindly, treat each other kindly, open up to mysteries. There's a lot more in it than that, but that's like, and fight back against oppression. That's in there too. It's in the ethos, fight back against oppression, right? So of course it aligns with Solarpunk. Solarpunk's all about the same kind of ethos, right? It's all about let's regreen the earth. Let's work together collaboratively. Let's throw off the oppressors.
Thank you for bringing it back to the charge of the goddess. I never thought of it that way. How the charge is so Solarpunk.
I love what's going on here. I love this. Keep going.
No. You need to ask questions because, see, like I said, I figured this would happen. Brightflame and I would speak enough of the same language that we would be able to communicate on that level, right? But Brightflame's goal here, obviously, is to be an activist through her fiction, right? She wants to share the ethos and maybe change people's minds about things. So we need people who don't know the language to ask the questions.
I had a question asking something very similar to this. So, Brightflame, in your opinion, what is the place of fiction in making societal change?
Well, you've got to be able to imagine that future that you want to live in, right? You need to be able to imagine the best, the most desired future that you want to live in order to have any hope of getting there. So as we are all sending out the creative juices, right, of even if it's not futuristic. Even if it's current world, we might be putting out visions of, well, that's still how we want to carve the current world in a way that it brings on a better future. So we have to be able to imagine it in order to have any chance of getting there. And then the other part of it is that we're designed for narrative, right? We think we change our beliefs in narrative, in story, not by hearing facts, not by somebody trying to argue a point with us, but by reading, listening to, or even creating stories. We're immersing ourselves in some other way, regardless of the genre. We become immersed in it and it affects us because it changes our lived experience. So well, I'm part of the, as you said in your intro, I'm part of the Climate Fiction Writers League, which I always want to say that superhero league. I love the word league
It's a
in
good
there.
name. It's cool.
Yeah. But climate fiction isn't always solar punk. It's not always hopeful. It can be quite dystopic. But even that,
Yeah.
immersing people in story, in narrative about even what's going on or what went on historically in historical fiction. It's affecting us. It's affecting us as if we are experiencing those things, and just becomes part of our cumulative experience that shapes our lives. So the more we can put out solar punk and similar um, kind of writing, to get people to think more in this direction, the better for the world, I think.
That's actually a question I ask. I don't want to say regularly, but to specific guests that we have on, because I think it's important to see everyone's opinion on that. And at least it's important for me to remind myself, oh yeah, you know what I mean? The things that we are doing, the things that we are creating are important. Which kind of leads me to another question. There are several points in your book where the characters are questioning if they've done enough to make change in their world, right?
Mm.
That personally for me is a question I've been asking myself quite a bit lately, especially since the elections. Like, how do you personally define enough, and what is enough for you?
Whew. Okay, so a bunch of things. My writing and my teaching are probably my biggest form of activism these days. Putting this stuff out to try to influence people, to try to seed ideas and lift people. Because, for instance, writing Solarpunk lifts me, and talking with people about this kind of
Mhm.
thing lifts me. And I'm not always optimistic and,
Mhm.
hopeful. So I like to keep
Sure.
doing that. So I can also beat myself up about I'm not doing enough. I'm not out on the streets. I'm not doing this or doing that. So
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in, first of all, taking stock of what you are doing and feeling pride in whatever it is that you're doing, and knowing what part of, whether you call it activism or just living, you're holding at the moment, and know that that affects other people
Mhm.
and how it affects other people. So we all don't need to be doing everything. So if I'm doing some writing and teaching, and I'm not out on the streets, but some of my friends are out on the streets, right? Or some of my friends are talking in interfaith circles, which I haven't done for a while, but had been a fairly big part of what I did. I was part of a couple of different interfaith circles to make sure that my form of witchcraft was accepted and understood as sacred, as a valid tradition, and add to the conversation. So I'm not doing that right now, but other people I know are. It's the whole collective of, what part are you holding? What part can you hold with ease to some extent, and when you're ready to push yourself out of that easeful situation, that's great as well. The other thing is, my practice is about making sure I'm grounded and centered. I have a personal practice that is kind of sort of in the book because there's a lot of techniques and a lot of magical practice in the book that are part of my spiritual path. But as long as you're grounded and centered, you have a sense of, okay, and now what? And if you're not grounded and centered, like if you're like, oh no, the world's falling apart and I'm not doing enough and I'm going to beat myself up and I don't know, I should get out there, I should do this or that. You're not really in a place to take the best next step for you, So
Right.
making sure you're grounded and centered and breathing. And then just allow inspiration to come in to know, okay, where am I needed? What am I willing to do? And if it doesn't come
And how much
immediately,
energy do you have to do it? That's another important thing, right?
yeah.
Like I spent 20 years teaching witchcraft and pagan spirituality. I had a metaphysical store. I had given my life completely to the goddess. I wrote a nonfiction witchcraft book. I had a column at pathos.com and I gave it up because I was exhausted from internal politicking and I did not have the strength to deal with it anymore. And when my store went under, I questioned everything. I went, is this really what the goddess wants me to be doing? Right. Since then, I've found a little niche where I teach writers to express their writing, to find the voice within them, newbie writers. I've created a safe little community where people who otherwise feel like outsiders often can come and feel that they have a place, right? And I write my fiction, which looks like a fantasy a typical D&D high fantasy type thing, but is actually a lesson on the evils of colonialism. And I that's the part I'm doing right now, right? And holding for my family. I'm a grandma now, right? So I get to do all of that. And, for me, that has, that's what I'm doing. When there's a protest in town, I join it. When there's a letter that needs to be written, I write it. And, will this change? I get the feeling that it's gonna, like that, it's time to shift, but I don't know where yet. So I'll let myself be guided. I like how your characters all do these different roles too. I can't wait to find out what happens with Tal, especially because Tal is the one who is working from within the enemy's ranks, right?
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see what she does with that because that's valid, right? That is a valid path, working within the ranks of the people who are not carrying the light, right? Or the wholeness, we'll say, so that we're not doing this light and dark thing, like, the wholeness, who are not being centered, who are not thinking about the earth first, right? She's doing work for the oil company, right? How does she use that to do her calling? Because I know she will. I got faith in her. I got faith in the characters. I'm about halfway through the novel right now. So,
I will tell you, I have like 30 pages left, and it's right as that is coming to a
Ahead, as of course it will. Yep.
yes.
Yep. Cool. I can't wait to see how that resolves.
Good. I want to hear what what your thoughts are once you see how it resolves.
No, it's a good point, right? Like all of the characters in your novel, there's 5 women, right? Plus an ancestor spirit, right? Who are like the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all about given fairly equal screen time, right? So we start from Betsy, probably because she's the newest, right? So she's kind of like our new person's introduction into this world, right? Which is really kind of fun, right? And all of them are very, very different people, right? And they all, like we have Fire, who is living in, the scummy areas of the world that I come from, right? And we've got, Tal, who has this highly successful business that is working with multi-million-dollar clients, and we've got everything in between, right? We got people who are shy, we got people who are aggressive, like it's and all of them serve a role, right? Like that's the cool thing. You recognize the elemental balance for those of us who who called what element at the beginning of the novel, Alan, is a key, right?
Wow.
Yeah, because that tells you what element those people are most associated with, right? And those have different associations in witchcraft and in paganism, and they serve those roles. But you need all the 5 elements to come together to make the whole. And if you don't have one of them, as we saw when, minor, should I do a mild spoiler? It's not really a big spoiler, the fire thing.
Well, if you're only halfway through, I guess you can't spoil it too much.
Okay, so, Fire, who's the, for obvious reasons, the combative, confrontational, sort of. I'm somewhere between Sail and Fire, by the way. That's kind of where I am. But they she, goes, I'm not doing this for a while, right? Because she's all about like you'll see. I bet you saw me in this character, Alan, right? I'm going to take the trouble head on. I'm going to bowl right through it, right?
Okay.
And that serves a purpose, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't always serve the purpose. Sometimes it's more harm than good, right? And they're all like that. They've all got their elements where sometimes you need one element and not the other, or, more of a balance of one thing than another. And I love how Brightflame, I love how you've done this with the characters, right? You see that they only work when they work as a cohesive that is non-hierarchical, that takes their turns taking the lead, right? And, where their strengths matter and they're best when they help each other with their weaknesses. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying, I had to say, I'm very proud of myself for over the years it took to write this story, for really listening to their individual voices and writing them as distinct characters. Because I was warned years ago when I first started drafting this, like, oh, you're a novice writer? There's no way you should be writing 5 points of view, let alone the 6th one that I slip in there.
Yeah, but if that's a novel your heart needs to write, don't listen to that, of course.
Yeah.
And you did it great. Yeah, there's no question. They're all very different people, and I like them all.
Well, I have a very serious question and a very non-serious question. I'm going to go with the serious question first. As a writer, like how did you manage to write all 5 characters in a way that represents a true community without falling into the hero trope, like the chosen one trope? Because it almost seems like you're going to at first, right? And I won't name names about what happens to spoil anything, but there's a certain character who seems like they're going to be that, right?
They're not.
And then
they are not.
Things kind of
there
change.
You go. There's a bit of a spoiler, but they are not. Yeah.
Well, part of it is because that's how I live my life, and the reclaiming tradition that's very influential in my life is crafted that way. I didn't set out, I don't even want to tell you how long it's been since I began the book, but I didn't set out to try to write a hero's journey. I always knew it would be a coven. I always knew there would be 5 because I didn't know if I'd make it overt or not. And I didn't make it very overt, that there's the 5 elements. And so there'd be 5 in the coven. I always knew the interaction among them would be really important and that it would be an ensemble cast. It would be the group's story. So the coven is almost, the 6th or the 7th character in a way, because they do form a whole that's greater than each individual. And I kind of just knew that would be the case and was writing from that perspective. It took me a while to get their voices as distinct as I did get them, which my process for that was really talking with each of them, asking, kind of in my witchy way, but in a way a lot of writers do, so who are you?
Mhm.
What's your background? Where do you come from? What's your story? What do you want to share with me? What do you want me to tell everybody? And how do you come together with these others in the coven? Like, what's that experience for you? So, I would talk with them and listen to that dialogue. And then I guess through the years, I was hearing their voices more and more and realized, oh, so Tal speaks in a way that it sounds like she's using semicolons. So when I'm writing Tal's chapters, I'm going to use semicolons. uh,
Mm.
and the old ones, who are the kind of the 6th character, the ancient ones, the elders who are part of the
Mhm.
story, don't use contractions, for instance, because they're actually based on an actual foremother from way, way, way back, who I speak with in my ways, my trance journeys, my connecting with my ancestors. It's not somebody I know in a family tree. It's somebody who comes through from literally millennia ago, like the characters in the book. So Anya in the story is really based on that foremother of mine and some of the things that she's offered to me. So, so I can hear her. And I see her as well. So all I had to do was capture that on the page.
That makes me think about another question I had for you, and I want to do a small preamble here. So our podcast co-host Diane, Kat, and myself, we're all basically completely different in our spiritual beliefs, right? Diane's a pagan, I'm a secular Buddhist, and Kat is a Christian, albeit a very progressive one. And I say that so that that we are open to these things, and hopefully our audience as well. At least they ought to be if they're listening to this podcast at this point in time. At least if they've been listening to us for any length of time, right, Diane?
Yeah, if they haven't left yet, they're probably not gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm really wondering what your spiritual practice looks like to you on a practical level.
It's in the book. That's the short answer. Because
Hmm.
I really, a secondary thing, I wrote the novel to change the world, right? I wrote the novel with a question in mind of, there are nefarious groups and individuals who are working at odds with the health of the planet and with justice for all living beings. So there's an entity with its claws in the web of life, really trying to rip apart the web of life. What do you do about that? So I wrote with that in mind right from the beginning. Like, what do you do about it? How do you find the working? What is the working for that? But also, my secondary thing was I wanted to embed witchcraft practice and dispel stereotypes about witches.
Mhm.
Have real witches represented as just any other character in a book might be, and also embed real magical practice, so that it would be breadcrumbs for those who seek. I picture younger witches picking my book up, kind of how I picked up, say, those Darkover books, and others pick up, Mists of Avalon and all those books from way back, and grab onto something and say, "Oh, I could try that." So that's why um, I have exercises in the book that the coven do together that people can actually do. The working is actually a real practice. I'm going to be offering more and more workshops about that because I really do believe that the more people, whether you're a witch or not, the more people who do something like the working, which for those of you who haven't read the book, it's an energetic practice, but it's a way of being part of nature and the web of life, shall I say. It's a way of brightening all that. It's a way of helping to repair the web of life. So the more people who do that, the better we'll all be. So really, I did embed a lot of my spiritual practice in the book.
Interesting.
It's one thing that as a pagan, I really loved, right? Because I know these exercises, right? I know these practices. I've done very similar things. It doesn't look exactly like that, but enough, right? Because of course, every tradition does things their own way, right? But enough that I could go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know exactly what we're doing here, right? A lot of pagan practice is mystical, Alan. It's about your own personal spiritual connection, right? It's not really about, like, we don't go to churches, right, and read from a book. We don't do that. That's not the way we do it, right? We do sing together, right? We generally call those chants. They're collective songs that are designed to be fairly simple so anybody can pick it up and join in, right? Like the witches do in the book, right? But we also do a lot of personal, visualization and communion, right? Like the witches do. We talk about walking around in the astral. Are we actually is this an actual hallucination? Not usually. It can be, right? Are we aware that this is the spiritual world as opposed to the physical world? Yes, right? Do we really believe that the act of magic changes the world? Now, there's a controversial subject that you will get if you ask two witches, you'll get three different answers, right? Because we all have different opinions on it, right? Is it just a psychological practice that we do to bolster our spirit and create a collective conscious awareness that we can all strive for? Could be. Right? Does it actually physically make changes in energy that enact things on the world that we can see in physical and visual reality? Sometimes. I've had experiences where I've been at a ritual, we've done something and the lights came on, right? Yeah. It's happened. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know, I can't say for sure it was us, but when anyone's doing a spiritual practice and they're communicating with their deity or their power as they see it or their force, do they know for a fact that they're actually reaching? No, we feel, right? And we trust.
That's right. Yeah, you said it so well, Diane. I love how you framed that. And that brings to mind for me of whether I live in a world that I'm probably rather naive about how much bias against witches and witchcraft there might still be out there, because I'm so immersed in my tradition and my communities. When I'm in New York City, for instance, I don't experience any issues like that. But I've noticed some, I don't know, hesitation at bookstores, for instance, to pick up my book that has a pentacle on its cover. And I wonder if it's that, or if it's just that I'm with a small press and, I'm not a big name author, if it's only that. So I wonder how much bias there is still in the world. But it's something that I wanted to be out there about my practice because I do feel like magic can help. Magic's just one tool, just like other tools that we have out there. And magical activism is a real big part of the reclaiming tradition. Some of the stuff I embedded in the novel is stuff we actually do. If you think about the astral that Diane expressed so well, it's another realm. It's kind of what quantum physics talks about, right? And all the multiverse. There isn't just this one physical world. So if you can kind of step into another one, a world where everything's pure energy and anything's possible, and what exists in the physical has some ties into the astral in some form. So if you can, say, affect things on the astral that you want to change in the physical realm, maybe that helps. If you want to work some magical activism in the astral, to affect the world, for instance, politics and all the crap going on, like the rise of fascism, not just in the US, but all over. If you want to do some work on the astral around that, won't hurt. I think it would help.
Yeah.
And at the very least, even if you're not, if you can't believe that you're making energetic change, right, then you're making personal change, right? And you're connecting to other people who believe the same things that you do, at least mostly, right? So you can unite your will, your intention, your resolve, right, to deal with the problem, and it doesn't feel like you're alone flapping in the wind.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I hate to say it, but we have to wrap up. Believe it or not, an hour just flew by. So
I am not surprised it went by so fast. I figured that this would be the case.
Yeah. We were all over the place too. Yeah.
That's how we do it here. Brightflame. We're all over
you can blame the fact that Alan and I are both ADHD poster children.
Absolutely.
No, I love that. I love an organic conversation like that and going off on tangents and
No, well, we still have 3 more questions for you. 2 of them are very easy questions. 1 is a hard question. I'm going to give you the hard question first, though, and get it out of the way. Well, for a lot of people, this is a hard question. Maybe it won't be for you.
I get the feeling it won't.
Well, I can't wait to hear this.
I actually get that feeling too. It tends to be a hard question for horror writers, I've noticed. Anyway, what is bringing you hope right now?
Well, writing Solarpunk, as I said, and talking about Solarpunk, and I'm going to be doing some teaching at a couple of upcoming witchy events about Solarpunk witchcraft, and I'm actually working on a nonfiction book on Solarpunk witchcraft. So, and finding so many people saying, yes, that makes so much sense. I'm a Solarpunk witch too, So that lifts me. That keeps me hopeful. In addition to the working being out in the world, which is set in the present day pretty much, I also write futuristic Solarpunk that's nothing like the working. And so as I write more of that really lifts me because it goes back to the future I want to live in. I'm basically writing that future, and it goes back to
excellent.
Yeah, it goes back to Starhawk and I taught together. I forget what year or other we offered this particular weekend about storying the future, and she leads amazing trances or visualizations, immersive journeys, and this particular one was to the future that we really desired. And I began writing it. So all the stories set in what I call the threads are that future. And so the more I stay there, the more I try to bring it forward and send that out to the world. That gives me hope. And all the people doing similar things gives me hope.
Yeah. I will say very quickly, I think The Working is the first Solarpunk novel I've read. Well, I shouldn't say novel. I should say piece of fiction that I've read that wasn't science fiction. Because I think every other piece of Solarpunk I've read has been science fiction. I'm almost positive. So it's been interesting for that to see it from a more, I guess I would call it fantasy, a more fantasy side, you know. Although I don't know if I would call it exactly fantasy either. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't. Even though, I mean, I kind of have to, right, for marketing to some extent. I've even resigned myself
Yeah.
to people calling it urban fantasy. But, there's no
Mhm.
vampires, there's no werewolves, and there's no
No.
stereotypic witches. They're real people who practice real witchcraft
Real
in there.
people who are like the real witches that I have met and that I am. I can see me in the characters, so it's cool.
Yeah. So it's fabulous because I do push some things a little farther into the fantastical.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it, by the way, for the record. I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely absorbing.
Yay, spread the word.
It's absolutely holding my attention. It's fantastic. I can't wait to see how it comes out. Like I said, I adore your characters. I love that they're all very three-dimensional, four-dimensional even, right? And they're likable, believable, even though you can see all their flaws, right? And maybe because of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all have merits and flaws that we bring to the table, right? And we're best when we support each other in our weaknesses and, give each other the reins in our strengths. And they do that. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to watch.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah. Okay. Last two questions. These are super easy ones. Obviously, you want to promote The Working, but is there anything else that you would like to put out there into the world for people to look for or read?
Well, I've collected those stories I mentioned that take part in the threads, as I call it, that futuristic place that's based on the world I want to create. I've collected them into a mosaic novel, and I'm trying to sell that at the moment. So hopefully, and some of those stories are out there, actually, in the anthologies, magazines, and another one's coming out roughly January, I think. Susan K. Quinn's Bright Green Futures anthology I'm in, and there's one of my thread stories. Yeah, that's wonderful. I want to lift that. Everyone should keep an eye out for that Bright Green Futures anthology.
Awesome.
Was your story in Luminescence, was that one of your thread stories? I really enjoyed that one too.
Yes, and that one is when the web went down in bioluminescent.
Right.
And in Solarpunk magazine is Maybe We Are All Witches. And there's a fun thing in that one. It refers back to The Working in a fun way. So you can read that for free on my website. I have a link to that one. There's a couple of my thread stories that I link to in my website that you can read for free. And I'll be putting more content on my very messy website. I need to redo it in some year or other.
Oh boy.
I feel that.
Yeah, we could talk about that after we're off because Diane and I have been talking about that with the podcast as well. So don't feel alone.
Our website's kind of a shit show right now.
Oh, yeah. Boy,
and if any listeners are witches or want to learn more about witchcraft, we have a witch camp coming up that's hybrid, and I'm going to be teaching with another person doing the online path that's about Solarpunk. You can find out about that on
Cool.
my website also. That's Winter Witch Camp coming up in February.
That's awesome. Make sure Alan gets the link and we can put it in the show notes when we post the episode.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll also
Yeah.
be teaching at
Yeah.
the Sacred Space Conference in March, doing something similar, but much shorter than what I'll be doing at Witch Camp.
Awesome.
Cool. I'll have to ping Susan. She didn't tell me that she's putting out an anthology. So Susan K. Quinn has been on the podcast. Well, she's done one of our columns for us for a couple years now. So and I've hung out with her like in real life a few times too. So we're pals.
Yeah, you're
And,
in Pittsburgh.
yeah.
So many reclaiming witches are in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. I'm jealous of all the community out there. And then Susan and you are out there, a lot of Solarpunk action.
Yeah. We actually have our own Solarpunk. I guess it would be a convention or something. It's like it's what second year. This last year, 2024 was the
Mhm.
second year of it. So it's like brand new. It was pretty cool. I went the first year and hung out, and I had to skip this last year. I forget why. I think I was doing something else at the time, but yeah, there's lots of cool stuff in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's actually a really cool city, and a lot of people think of it like it's, I don't know, 1885 and everything's still covered with smoke and grime and whatever. You know what I mean? But it's not. It's not like that at all. Anyway, last thing is, where can everybody find you online? I know I mentioned your website up front at the beginning, but why don't you mention that again and anywhere else that you're online?
Yeah, brightflame.com, and I have all my socials in there, but I guess I'm trying to be active all over the place, to keep the buzz up
Oh,
about my book and
yeah.
talk to other people interested in solar punk and doing this kind of work. So I'm on Instagram at brightflame.2. There's too many bright flames out there for some reason. Well, reasons I know that we won't go into. So yeah, brightflame.2 on Instagram, at brightflame on Blue Sky. I'm in wandering.shop on Mastodon, at brightflame. Wandering.shop is the sci-fi fantasy instance on Mastodon. Really great solar punk conversations on Mastodon. I've met real interesting people there.
Cool.
So yeah, and I actually started a YouTube channel to start putting out various videos about Solarpunk, about my book, and I'm behind in putting the latest one up. But all that you can find on my website.
Awesome.
Awesome. I just went to look for you on Blue Sky and I found you there. So if you find Sable Aradia following you, that's me.
Right, great. I will follow you back.
Fantastic. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a super interesting conversation. I
Yeah.
still can't believe an hour flew by that fast.
Absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me on. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And that was our conversation with Brightflame. Before we continue, don't forget you can support us by telling your friends about us on social media, or you could also rate and review us. You check us out on patreon.com/ifthisgoeson, and we'd be able to appreciate any help if you're able to contribute. We also have a Ko-fi, that's Kofi. So I'm going to keep that super short tonight. Diane, thoughts, opinions?
Oh, she was great. I really enjoyed that conversation for
I knew
obvious
you would.
reasons. Yeah, well, this
I knew
is
you
why
would.
I was, this is why I had to do it, even though it was like, oh, this really is cutting short, and I don't know. The time is tight, but you're right. I got to do this. So, and no, that's great. I feel like I've made a real connection to someone who's very, like she said, aligned. Right? We
Yeah.
share common interests, common goals. I really liked her. I think we could be friends. That was a great
Yeah.
time, and her book really is awesome. I really love
Yeah.
her characters a lot. Should read it for the characterization alone.
There was so much I wanted to talk about the book that we just never got to. I guess that happens every podcast. I don't even know why I mentioned it anymore. But one I definitely wanted to talk about her. style a little bit too, because I really felt like, and I feel like this about Solarpunk in general, and this is something I want to ask a Solarpunk person about, but Solarpunk to me often comes off as almost nonfiction, even though it's clearly fiction. There's still something. There's often
Very grounded in reality,
yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
because it's like it's not like you go into this, I don't know, horror or science fiction or whatever world and all these problems are gone. They're still present there, and they're actually much of the time the main focus, right? And so it's like it's almost it's that, but it's also like the writing style. I feel like it's often very straightforward. You know what I mean? Hemingway-esque, if you will. Like shorter sentences, straightforward writing. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
People aren't interested in creating pretty phrases. They're interested in telling the story, and they want to ground
Yeah,
people in people you can believe in, right? Characters that are
yeah,
human, you know?
yeah. Yeah, very hard science fiction-esque, if you will.
Yeah, valid.
Yeah, and I do think it's probably one of the main types of modern hard SF. You know what I mean? At least I feel that way.
Right?
And then there's the whole fantasy branch, which we've talked about for the first time tonight. So,
It's I think actually, yeah, solar punk, but also lunar punk, right?
hmm hmm
It's also very lunar punk in its presentation and ethos, and not just because the characters happen to be witches in a
hmm
practice of witchcraft that a modern witch in our time would, clearly does recognize, right? It's more like the whole, I want to use the term that I can't use because I know it has a very specific meaning, but I want to use the term magical realism,
hmm
right? Is there another term for that isn't appropriative?
Don't know. That's an excellent question, but I can see the parallels that you're drawing there for sure. For sure.
Right? Right? Like at some points you like I thought, okay, now I knew what was going on because like I said, this is a practice that I recognize. This is a spirituality that is mine and that I know, right? So for me, it was a very simple thing to follow in many ways, but I got the feeling a lot of times because they cross over from the physical to the astral, right? And sometimes there's a catalyst for that. They do a ritual, they do meditation and they go, right? But sometimes it just happens, right? And I found myself wondering, would someone who is not familiar with that form of spirituality find that difficult to follow? Did you?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Let me add some caveats in here, right? I didn't find it super hard to follow. There were definitely times when I understood that I was missing context, right? Like I had a pretty good idea what they were doing in like X and Y situations, right? But I knew that I was definitely missing some social context or something there, right? And now the caveats being I'm a very eclectic person and I've read all kinds of weird stuff, so maybe that helped some, right?
Uh-huh.
Also, it's my job to figure out things that I don't understand
Yes.
and explain it. So I'm good at figuring out things I don't understand. So maybe that was part of it too. You know what I mean?
That's what I wanted to know, right? Because okay, so I tell people, right, who are just like starting to get their work out there, right? I tell them your reader is smart, right? Especially when you're
Mhm.
writing science fiction or fantasy, speculative fiction. People are smart. They want to figure it out. You don't have to hit them over the head with a club to explain it to them,
Mhm.
right? They will generally figure it out, right? And I wanted to know if that was holding up with something that
Mhm.
I knew about, and good. I'm glad it is because there's a lot in there that's really, really cool. And I wanted, I wanted to know, can she cross into the mainstream more? Is this a time when people are ready to hear this? Right? Can she break past just talking with other witches? Right?
Mhm.
And if you're following, then I
Oh
think she
yeah, totally
can, and
following.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I followed everything that was important. And now I still have like 20 or 30 pages left because I'm going to out myself a little bit here. I actually thought the interview was on Friday. So,
Right.
and for listeners who don't know what day it is, because this is kind of out of time, it's Wednesday. So I was like planning on having a few more days to read it. So I didn't quite finish it. But yeah, everything I've read so far, I've totally been able to follow, if not from just context clues, then from just having read fantasy kind of stuff before. Because some of it,
Perfect.
delves into that enough where I can be like, oh yeah, this is like weird monster thing, and oh yeah, I get this. There's another dimension, sort of. Yeah, I get this. You know what I mean? Like I was able to assemble the pieces.
It was good. It's good for like I wanted to know that because for me, I had the context, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if for someone who didn't have the context, I wanted to know, was it coming through? I'm glad it is because I think it's wonderful and I want people to read it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely. Okay. What are you reading right now aside from the working?
Aha, I am going through a reread of the Aubrey Maturin series, which is
Oh, I don't know that one.
they're the books that influenced or spawned the movie Master and Commander.
Oh, yeah. I know you like those ones.
Yeah, I really do. I kind of like that high seas adventure kind of stuff. And I'm rereading them mostly because I've been editing my toy soldier novels. And I felt because it had been a while since I had touched base with them for various reasons that I wanted to get back into that high seas feel because it's very important to my books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but I just like the series for its own sake too. Another series where characterization is really strong, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
characters make the books worth reading and their friendship and how they interact, right?
Right.
Like it's interesting because just like it's interesting. Yeah, actually, just like with Brightflame's book, neither one of them is the main character. They're both the main character. And you could totally read the
Huh.
series as either one of them being the main character and it would still make sense.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
What are you reading?
Well, speaking of high sea adventures, I'm reading Moby Dick right now.
Sweet.
Yeah. Which I have actually found to be quite hilarious, to be honest with you.
I thought it was hilarious too in places. Yeah.
I'm only like 7 chapters in, so and apparently the chapters can be quite short. I mean, I realize I'm kind of taking it a little bit out of its original context in it being funny, but the observations that Ishmael has of Queequeg when they first meet and stuff, I don't know. They're hilarious to me. You know what I mean? Because he's goes out of his way to be like not racist and not all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
But still he makes these observations. I feel like it should be like it should be like a television show like Friends or something like that, right? Like I really feel like those first section of chapters are like straight out of a situational comedy,
Right.
So I've been enjoying that, and I'm also about to pick up, as soon as I finish the watching myself, I'm going to pick up Jubilee by Stephen K. Stanford, which is a Flame Tree Press book, which I will be reviewing. And it's like I'll just read the back real quick. It was meant to be a simple in and out mission. Jubilee is a lawless artificial world existing within its own parallel universe, a seething cesspool of vice ruled by an eccentric AI, or so they say. Detectives Cole and Danny were sent to the Jubilee on a hastily organized mission to recover the body of a leading conservative politician. Someone, it seems, has been a naughty boy, but the corpse has been switched and the imperiled partners find themselves drawn together. They might be falling in love, or they might be saving the galaxy. Either way, the authorities will not be pleased. So, it sounds fun.
It does sound fun. That's cool. Let me know. That sounds like my cup of tea, actually.
Yeah, it's it seems super fun. I'm looking forward to it as a very leisurely read.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, let me know. Let me know how it is.
I will. I guess we ready to wrap it up then?
Yeah, I think we pretty much better. I heard your alarm go off there. You'll probably cut that out of the final recording, but
yeah,
it means you have elsewhere to be. So thanks for setting this up, Alan, as always. I had a great time. I hope you're well.
Yeah, thanks. That's it for us. We are keeping hope alive one episode at a time. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by and produced by Alan Bailey. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrosky, and the outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guest, Brightflame. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.